just enjoy the fresh air.
Yeah, I understand that. So are you in London usually? Are you based in London?
I'm usually based in London, yeah.
Yeah.
We have our offices in East London
Oh
as
yeah.
well as in more in the center in Mayfair.
Oh great. So that's usually where I'm based. I lived in Hackney before, but we're in Shoreditch. Accelerator is based in Shoreditch. So for me, I'm in Gibraltar right now, and it's an absolute
Oh, lovely.
yeah, looking out to the water. And there's a lot more boats here than usual, I have to say, that are making it a lot of noises. But I'm very, very happy with it. What about you, Jake? Where are you based?
Yeah, so I'm not anywhere as glamorous as you two. I'm in Norfolk in the UK.
Oh, how lovely though. That is a really beautiful part of the UK.
It is, yes, and I'm
It's,
lucky enough to live here as well. So
oh, no, yeah, well, you've won. You've won,
no,
Jake.
I don't think so. You know, I'm not in the Alps and I'm not in Gibraltar. You know, hey.
I know, I think when I'm in meetings, people are getting a little bit angry with me. But it has to be done, it has to be done. So it's 3 minutes past 11. Shall we kick things off?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Happy to.
So basically, a warm welcome to everybody that's joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. And thank you both to Antoine and to Jake for joining us as well. So this is In Conversation with Entrepreneurs. And we're really lucky to have these two guests join us today. They're going to talk through their journey as an entrepreneur and as an investor. And we're really lucky to have audience from right across Central Asia tuning in. So we've got Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. And I really enjoyed actually this time remote working where we can involve much wider audiences. I think it's a really fantastic thing that's come out of this global challenge that we're facing right now. So today's session is going to last about an hour, and we're going to hear from both guests. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction to me and what I do. We're going to hear from both guests what their journey has been, and then I'm going to ask them some questions. But what I'd say to you as an audience, please really get involved. There's no such thing as bad questions, in my opinion. And for you to have the opportunity to access people that have got so much experience, that it's just a very unique thing to happen. So no such thing as bad questions, and really begin to think in the first part of this session what you would really like to know. You know, it's a fantastic opportunity we've got here, so let's take full advantage of that. So also we've got the hashtag #MyCreativeSpark. So if you're on social media, please hashtag. We'd like to promote this event to as many people as possible. And yeah, it'll last about 1 hour. So we'll be finished up within an hour. So I'd like to just kick things off by introducing myself. My name is Natasha Triay, and I'm Senior Student Enterprise Manager at London Metropolitan University, based at a co-working space called Accelerator London, which is actually owned by the university. And I always think, what does that job title mean? It's a bit of a confusing one, really. But basically, I love my job. I get to help students and graduates every single day set up businesses. And I run a number of different programs in doing that, whether it be for freelancers, whether it be for people with very early stage business ideas, tech ideas, ideas that need validated. And I'm running my flagship program this summertime. It's a 12-week program for early stage ideas, a very intense program. And throughout all our programs, we've got a large focus on actually speaking to customers and validating the idea and understanding actually, is there an opportunity there or not? A lot of the time when I meet people that have got a business idea, it's very solution focused. And this whole part, the whole journey before validating an idea isn't done. So we take them through a very grilling process and we help them to establish actually, is this something that I should be doing with my life? You know, setting up business is really hard work. It takes a lot of dedication, and understanding if you should do it is really important. So everything through all our programs, we are about getting students, graduates to take action, to actually understand if there's an opportunity there or not. They learn a whole lot of skills throughout that as well. So prior to that, I worked at Queen Mary University of London, and I was there for a couple of years. A lot of that role involved working with PhD students who wanted to commercialize projects. So a lot more exposure to tech businesses, I suppose. And then prior to that, I was at the Prince's Trust charity, which is a charity that helps young people from more disadvantaged backgrounds set up businesses and give them business skills. And prior to that, I set up a social enterprise in Scotland. And I think, this conversation today is all focused on investments. And I think, looking back to that point when I started up myself, today we're probably going to talk not so much about social enterprises. And I know a lot of people in this Creative Spark program have got a focus on social enterprise. And I would say to you right now to actually look at what the biggest thing I learned was how you can make it commercially viable as well, because you're wanting to create social impact. And a lot of people will be relying on funding and they don't actually really consider how they're going to generate an income, which is so important to make us sustainable and to be a long-term viable social impact project. So I would say that was my kind of learning from that. And I'd also like to touch on as well the fact where we're based in London, we're based at Accelerator London, which has got 30 tech startups that are working from there. So although I helped students and graduates at London Met and my involvement in the Creative Spark programme, I've been doing activities in country in Uzbekistan since the programme began. And I also work with these 30 tech startups that are based at Accelerator. So they're all very early stage. Last year, they raised collectively about £14 million in investment, made about £22 million in revenue and created about 19 new jobs. So these are figures that we see from these startups every single year. So that's just a little bit of a brief overview from myself. And just to note as well, when you ask questions, you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen, you should have the comment section there. And I'll be picking those up as we go through. So first of all, if we go to Antoine Poirson, who is partner at Antler. Now, are we going to be able to get you to share your screen, Antoine?
Exactly. Yeah. Excellent.
So I'll pass on to you.
Great. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be talking to you today. So maybe briefly in a few minutes about myself and about my journey, both as founder as well as investor. So I'm partner at Antler UK. Antler is a global early stage venture firm. So we invest in startups very early on. And I will tell you more about Antler in a minute. Before that, I was the co-founder and chairman of StanPlus Technology, which is a VC-backed startup focused on solving for the medical transportation, so primarily ambulances in India. And before that, I hold an inside MBA, and before that, I was actually on more of the technical side of things, practicing as an engineer in the power sector, which took me actually to Kazakhstan, where I lived for 18 months many years ago. So that's a few words about me. Maybe touching on my founder journey. So I built a startup, I would say about 5 years ago, named StanPlus, and our core focus was to improve the access to emergency care. So I'd be happy to answer questions about that. But basically, in very simple, we took the Uber model and we added the ambulance angle to it, which is emergency healthcare, emergency access to hospitals, and that became StanPlus, which is a tech company that we launched, headquartered in Singapore, operating primarily in India, but with the potential to scale to any emerging markets where the ambulance networks need to be optimized. So that's the startup I built. I spent about 3 years scaling it, got it to a Series A, to about 2 million in revenues, and then moved on to the other side, which is the investor side. Briefly about Antler. Antler is a global early stage venture fund. We're live in 14 offices across 6 continents, so pretty much across the globe. We still need to expand a bit more toward Eastern Europe and even east of that. To come to some of the regions you guys are tuning in from today. We've so far received about 50,000 applications for our support, for our programs, and we've worked with 1,500 entrepreneurs over the past couple of years. And we also created a network of 400 advisors globally. That's a great support to the startups we work with. Maybe very briefly about the process. We basically enable entrepreneurs from day one from before they have a team, from before they have an idea they want to work on. And we do that with a standard program that we run twice a year in every locations we operate in. And that program is split in two phases. The first phase is really about the team and the idea, and we will help the 100 entrepreneurs who join us. We will help them to form the right founding teams with the right complementary skills, similar motivations, and we will help them develop and validate a business model. Focusing with the problem in the first place and really validating that, as Natasha mentioned earlier, and then moving on to what the solution for that problem would be. After 2 months, all the teams who kind of formed and built an idea present to our investment committee, and at that point we decide to invest. We invest £80,000 per companies for a minority shareholding of 10%. And then once we invested, then we start working in a very hands-on manner with the entrepreneurs to help them develop their MVP, their minimum viable product, then take that to market and get into that iterative loop of engaging with their clients, developing their product further, and so on. And then toward the very end of our programs, we have what we call the demo day, where all the startups we invested in present to a broad audience of, let's say, 400 investors, angel investors, seed funds, who are the follow-on investors who will support them. So that's in brief about myself, and we'll have the occasion today to chat more about my experience and some of the work we do at Antler. Thank you. Natasha, I think you are on mute.
Yeah, here we go. Take two. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think that's really interesting. And I was just commenting on the fact that you've got a very personal journey with the entrepreneurs that you work with, which I suppose might be quite unique to you. Not all programs or investors have that such intimate relationship in the beginning, but I think very useful when you're working with these companies. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Exactly. So Jake Hithersay, we've got director and co-founder of Soak. Let's hear a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Yeah. So I've taken a slightly different approach to trying to articulate my journey from Antoine. I just kind of thought it would be useful just to give a little bit of context. Soak is an experienced design agency. We have a fairly broad set of global clients that we've done some amazing work for, and we're very proud of that. But I kind of just wanted to give a little bit of I guess an overview of my experience and some of the key learnings. This was, as per the kind of preamble to this conversational piece. So I think I just wanted to kind of say that I've taken perhaps a fairly unconventional route to where I am now, and that my journey really started out back in 1998. When I graduated from university with fine art. So some may say not a very useful degree. But I think basically it was struggling to find employment in the creative industry. This was in a time where investment in new startups was not really a thing. So I started doing a kind of, I guess, working for myself, building out promotional flyers, videos, websites for nightclubs, this taught me a lot of the basics in terms of working with clients, building relationships, and doing businesses. And I think that there were a few lessons that I learned from that period of my life, which were around the kind of that risks can be really rewarding. Don't overpromise. And you can't always trust everyone. So I think I was kind of doing this in an environment where there was no real kind of support framework for new businesses. Essentially, this allowed me, this work allowed me to build up a portfolio and secure a job as a web designer. So, in that itself, not very entrepreneurial, but in 1999, this was quite a new thing. Not many people were doing that. And it gave me really good experience and greater insight into digital technologies. And I gained some more private clients during that time, and continued to design promotional materials and websites for them. And again, I started learning things from this experience. So I realized that actually the idea and the vision for a project were much more important than the actual hands-on implementation. So I started to find partners that I could work with to develop the more time-consuming and specialist aspects of the project. I realized I was no database expert. So then my kind of employment moved into a much more commercial and client-facing role. It was essentially working in the selling and sourcing of signage and promotional material for large international brands. It gave me really valuable experience around contracts, presenting ideas, pitching, selling, margins, as well as supplier and client relationships. I think the lessons that I learned from that time were it was much easier to sell ideas to people who know they wanted something, and that you shouldn't undervalue your ideas, and that there was no shame in making a margin or a profit. But I also realized I didn't like target-driven selling. So I think after I'd worked in the signage and merchandise industry, I moved back towards the digital space. I felt much more native to that. I was still employed, but I was managing key accounts and driving ideas and innovation for large-scale digital projects, again for global brands. And I progressed my career through a couple of businesses doing this, but I found it very hard to juggle my own clients, my own ideas with the commitments that I needed to do my job. So, you know, I'd learned so much about the digital industry, understanding processes, specialist disciplines, built lots of contacts, confidence and ideas. So I think, you know, the lessons I took from that period of time was, you know, believe in your ideas, not just undervalue them, and then really understand the problem that you're trying to solve, know your stuff, so really understand the detail and build good relationships. So then the kind of the final chapter of this here was the circumstance and opportunity arose for me to take the leap and actually create my own real business. And I felt very well equipped to do that through the experience that I'd gained. It's things that you can't learn at university. It's real world experience. And I think so that the ability to build a talented team of people that can help deliver really good solutions has helped us scale and grow the business. We've been doing the business for over 11 years now. We've worked with some fantastic clients, but actually, interestingly, I've been very much involved in a number of startup businesses and ventures, and I think this is where some of the the relevant conversation can happen today, because I think we've often got involved in investing through sweat by providing consultative, creative and technical services to build out sweat equity in companies. So that's been quite an interesting journey. I've seen lots of things happen. Some have gone really well, but actually the lessons that I've learned is that not everything will be successful, and that you need to learn from your mistakes and be adaptable and resilient. So yeah, that's kind of a quick snapshot of.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jake. It looks like you've learned a lot in your time. And I think it's really important to have, as an entrepreneur, to have that mindset of growth always. And it seems like, and I suppose to the young people as well that are kind of aspiring to be entrepreneurs, it's using the experiences and maybe not understanding those experiences at the time, but pulling out what can you actually learn from them that's going to better you and further whatever it is you're supposed to be doing in your life. So you've both touched on you've invested. So what do you look for, each of you, when you're investing in a business? What's the most important things you would say when you're looking to invest in a business? What do you look for? Antoine, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, so when I look at making an investment, I think I always look at the market potential, the novelty of the idea, etc. But it usually boils down to the team, to the people, the promoters of this startup, of this project, and it comes down to, do they have the drive, do they have the motivation, do they have the stamina to be successful in that space? Are they self-aware? Do they know what their limitations are? And will they be able to attract the right support along the way? Because it's a long journey. So if I invest in 1, 2, or 3 founders, for example, I want to make sure they'll be able to attract the right talent, the right advisors to support them along the way.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that the understanding the individual and looking out for the potential, the drive, the depth of knowledge that individual has, and passion for their business. I think that's hugely important. But actually, you also touched on the the need to really understand the marketplace and the success potential as well. That's you can't overlook that. And is the hill that needs to be climbed, the investment that's needed to create the business, is that going to pay off? Does it actually generate substantial income to be sustainable, which I think is what we were talking about earlier. So yeah, I completely agree with your points.
If you came across an idea which you thought there's a huge opportunity here, and then you worked with the team and you thought actually the team are not showing signs that are favorable to me, have you been in that situation before, and what would you do?
I made those mistakes. It did. I think the way building a business is a journey and a learning journey. Investing is also a learning journey, and it's only after a few investments that you really get used to understanding what exactly you're looking at, and making mistakes is part of that learning journey. It's early on. I think it's easy to really get attracted by the market potential, by how novel the idea is. But if in the end there are shortcomings in the team and the team is not able really to make up for it, then that makes it a riskier bet. So as an investor, I think over time it's really important to make sure to always default back your investment decisions on, is the team the right team to go solve for that problem?
Yeah, I think, and to add to that, I think the need for somebody to be really resilient and know that they might fail, and to be able to keep going with that risk, I think is really important. The team's ability to learn from mistakes and learn very quickly. I think there's the old saying, isn't there? Fail often and fail fast. Which I think it should be a good mantra for people. If you're trying to develop something, if it's a product or a service, you have to test things, and you have to learn very quickly and be adaptive in the way that you grow and scale the business.
And it can be very hard when you're starting out at the beginning stage of that journey. I know that the students that we're taking through the process right now have never developed an idea, and I suppose it's kind of getting over that rejection. It's how you kind of develop your resilience and separating your idea from you. And I think, you meet people and their idea is their baby. You're still passionate about it. But I think that can kind of help to develop the resilience, is separating the idea from yourself, and then just making sure you keep going and you keep going.
Yeah.
And you don't then take it personally.
Yeah, I agree. Having a kind of a healthy sense of detachment and being objective about the idea, I think, is really, really important. And people will be expected to justify the business model to investors as well. Not even just to us when we've worked with clients, or we've worked with startups that want to achieve something. We have to challenge that. We have to really drive into the business model, into the individuals, to see whether it's going to be successful or not. And we even actually do that with our clients. Some big brands have come to us with ideas, and we're like, hey, hang on, is that sensible? Have you really explored the marketplace? And it can be the it could be the kind of whim of a new marketing director or something, and it's like, well, we need to challenge this, and we need to learn quickly. We need to explore the marketplace.
And I suppose
Exactly.
that's the challenge with creativity as well, the balance between the creativity and the business side. I think I've met that a lot, where you can get kind of very focused on an idea and how big it is and the whole creative side of it, but then actually exploring the business model and actually is this viable or not is core. It's essential.
Yeah. But equally, I think creative determination can sometimes pay off as well.
Yeah,
I think that's why it's that emotional attachment to an idea and the distance that an entrepreneur should put with it is very important. And what I've observed is a key way to do that is to actually be attached to the problem you're solving rather than the actual solution. Because if the solution is not the right one, and if you get that feedback along the way, then you can always move on to another solution. But you're always solving for the same issue.
Yeah,
and it's usually a great way to onboard people, because people will always align with the problem you're solving. It's easy to agree that there is a problem and that this problem needs to be solved. How we do it and what's the right solution, that's something entrepreneurs need to discover along the way.
Yes, it's something to be. We say that customers don't buy products or services, but they buy solutions to their problems. And I think I was touching on a bit at the beginning, where people will be very solution focused. And I think especially if you're very technical as well, because you have that skill, but so important to actually really deeply explore what the problem is and what the pain point is, because that will mean that somebody then pays for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I touched on that in my slides. I think, we're kind of learning fairly on that you really need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. I think is so important. One of the things that I'm a big advocate of is that kind of a strategy and planning and research kind of piece before any project business is initiated. You really need to understand the environment. You need to think about what it is you're trying to, the problem that you're trying to solve. Absolutely.
For sure. So moving on, what would you say the hardest lesson is that you've learned when investing, Antoine? And maybe I will ask you, Jake, that in terms of being an entrepreneur from that kind of perspective, the hardest lesson you've learned.
So I've been thinking about that, and I think both my founder journey and kind of my investor journey have contributed to that. And I've identified a few points. The first one is, as an entrepreneur, is actually, I think, being open, being willing to talk about your idea is something that's really important. And I realized that whenever I was doing that, I was very surprised by the support, by the encouragement I get from my audience, from other people. And I think early on in the founder journey, it's usually people maybe tend to be protective to their idea, not talk about it too much, because maybe they fear that their idea is going to be stolen. But it's actually the other way around. It should be, because people don't necessarily steal ideas, but they're always willing to help or encourage. So I think that's a great lesson. As an investor, I've learned how, and I mentioned that earlier, how not to get too excited about the idea, but really to focus on the people who are behind it. And that's, again, with the hypothesis that ideas are kind of a commodity, are well spread. The people who can build the idea, who can achieve that vision, are actually the precious ones. So that's what to focus on. And another one as an investor is that amazing founders, amazing entrepreneurs can be anywhere. And we all have kind of the physical spaces or networks we evolve in. But I would think that one investor should always be very open to a discussion from wherever it comes, because amazing people, amazing founders can come from almost anywhere, no matter, let's say, the background, the education level, or their experience level. It's a question of what is the inner drive of that person, what will make them persevere and achieve a vision that they have.
Very, very people focused. And I like what you said there about developing an idea in secret, because we have so many people that I'm not going to talk about it because somebody's going to steal it. And I would say, no one's going to steal your idea. You are the 99% and your idea is the 1%, I think. Right. That's exactly what I believe as well. What about you, Jake?
Well, I mean, just to kind of follow on from that point, I think it's very interesting. I've met a number of people who have had so much belief in their idea without necessarily understanding, what the solution that they're trying to, solve is, that they've spent huge amount of investment on IP protection. They've obviously there's standard contracts that you can issue that are pretty, easy to kind of roll out, non-disclosure agreements which give you some protection over your ideas. So that I'd always give somebody advice if they feel very strongly about their idea, they think that it's got value. You can open a conversation with a non-disclosure agreement, but actually some people that have got, without even really thoroughly doing the research, invested loads of money into, IP and trademarking. And it's like, wow, you've gone a long way down this journey only to realize that there's a big blocker here, So, I think that's a very interesting point. But I think, just kind of going back to the question around the kind of harder lessons, I think it's been actually sometimes challenging people to the point of it being a bit uncomfortable, right? I think you need to ask difficult questions. Some people don't like that, and it comes back to this, this idea that people are very, very sentimental about their ideas and their vision for something, and it can be quite difficult to really challenge someone and get under the bonnet of the problem,
But really important to do that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in the beginning stages, when they're investigating this problem and unearthing it, will start off with friends and family because it seems the most natural place to go to. But I don't know about you guys, but I think that's just not good, because humans want to encourage the people that we know, and also they're usually not your customer in any case. So really actually exploring who your customer is and asking these questions to actually unearth what is the problem, and making sure that you are asking the right questions.
Maybe to emphasize on that, and on Jake's point around investing time, investing effort, but also investing cash. we made that mistake when we started Stunt Plus in the first place, that we spent time, the three of us, we were three co-founders, thinking about what we wanted to build without really validating with our users what this was about. And we actually invested quite a bit of cash into getting that up and running, getting an app developed external. And it's only 2 months later, after having spent time on our market with our users and all the stakeholders, that we realized that all this investment, all this app developed, was literally useless. And so we started all over again. And it costed money, it costed cash. I guess it's a learning. And the key point here is you can invest efforts in a small, let's say, quantum, with a lean approach to just figure things out along the way. You don't need a very fancy website, for example, or you don't need a massive user research to move forward. But just a more linear approach with some simple tools that are available out there can help an idea or an exploration mature quite far down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of the minimum viable product is definitely something that we advocate. But actually, equally, I think that we put a lot of gravity against the idea of user research. So the market research, the user research, understanding use cases, driving out user journeys, and really trying to test those out with early prototypes, I think is essential. I think there's a lot that you can do by some fairly practical steps to understand whether what you're proposing to do is right for the audience that you're aiming it at.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And you touched on something there, which is time. And I would really like to ask both of you, you're both very busy individuals. How do you manage your time when time is so precious? Any kind of practical tips?
I don't sleep, yeah.
Yeah. 10 coffees a day.
I think that's a very important one, and particularly for early stage founders, it's at the beginning there's just an idea, but then as soon as you start building, as soon as you start trading, for example, the amount of things to do just increase exponentially. And it's very easy as a founder to get kind of lost into to-do lists and just getting, crossing things off a list. So what I've started doing myself a few years ago is to just step back and maybe once a month really take an hour, really think about what matters to me, what matters to the project I'm leading, and identify maybe the top, let's say, 4 priorities, and make sure that along the next 30 days, most of what I do, most of the time that I spend are aligned to these priorities. And so that's one. And then the other one also is to delegate as soon as possible. Yeah. And that's key for early stage founders is you love what you're doing. At the beginning, you're the one doing, and then at some point you hire someone and you manage someone who's doing. And at that point, it's really important to just let them do. Help them understand what needs to be done, and then let them blossom. And it's magic, the amount of work that can then be achieved as a team.
Absolutely agree. I think, surrounding yourself with good people and not trying to do everything yourself, I think is so important. And I think there you kind of you touched on allowing other people to get that passion and motivation for the vision, and see them shine and blossom through the kind of the enthusiasm for the evolution of the business. I think that's a really important thing to do.
Exactly. I would. It almost comes down to ownership. There is in a startup there is always equity ownership, etc. But if you share a vision with someone, with some of your team members, and they start owning it, it's as if they were owning some part of the company. And that's the best way to motivate people.
Absolutely. And it's empowering them, really, isn't it? And it's bringing them in empowerment. Yeah, absolutely. Just before we go on to some other questions that I've got, I wanted to just touch on a couple that are in the comments here. So one from Anna: the practice of NDA or IP is not unusual for countries like ours. Have you got any comments on that?
It's not unusual. Yeah, well then, I think it's good. I mean, I think if that's a practice that's available to you and easy to roll out, and you've got a good idea, then absolutely I would. Oh, it's not usual. It's not usual. No. Well, I think depending on the kind of the environment that you're working with, who you're talking to, I guess you need to have trust. But I would think that documents like that are relatively available in template form that you can download and use. I don't think that there's any jurisdictions that you shouldn't be or couldn't put an NDA in place just for initial discussions with people.
Yeah. I think what I've seen is it's not applicable across all interactions. It's very easy for a founding team to just put up an NDA, a digital signature. It takes a second for the other party to sign it, and it's easy to implement. Now, if I look at the way the European kind of investor scene, the venture capital industry operates, it's all without NDAs. So ideas, communications, plans, pitch decks do flow around without NDAs. And a reason for that is the reputation matters a lot. So people are careful kind of by default. And it's not because you've shared your pitch deck, your investor presentation with an investor that they will, without an NDA, that they will share it around. I think they care about what you're building, and they usually just keep it for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've got another question here which kind of touches on what I wanted to ask next. Have the key messages for your customers and partners changed in isolation? And I wanted to really ask, what were your opinions of the current situation with the pandemic? Like, how do you feel that it's impacted investing and entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I think I've seen a notable change in certainly the appetite for some of the large corporates that we work with over the pandemic. I think that they seem far more risk averse. They're not willing to put significant budgets into things that they're not confident on. Now, that's not to say that that there aren't channels of product and business that that they won't invest in. I just think that everyone is a lot more sensitive to risk at the moment. That's my view on it. Antoine might have a different perspective. I don't know.
We've seen a lot of changes. I think the first one was just realization of what was happening, and we've spent extensive time with our portfolio. We have 20 startups in portfolio to help them realize what the pandemic would mean to their business in the short term and also in the longer term. We've been fortunate that for most of them it's actually been positive, and that's because most of them are kind of digitally enabled startups. Now we also understand that the pandemic and also the being locked up at home is difficult for all, and then there's healthcare challenges and some people are sick. So we've also understood that this was a major challenge, and we've been let's say we've supported our entrepreneurs with that. We've supported the community with that. We've maybe been less, let's say, we lowered our expectations in terms of how fast things would move forward. We've also been, let's say, kinder with our investors, because investors have been severely impacted with public market valuations moving around, and with maybe some of the investments that they made or some of the startups that they had backed being suffering from the pandemic. Now, what we I think in terms of the messaging, that we're now in a phase where it has become a new normal, and what we're seeing is these new operating conditions are actually accelerating what we're working on, which is an increased digitization of the economy across sectors. So we're fortunate to say that the pandemic is actually helping us reinforce our message, reinforce the fact that innovation is needed going forward. That the way the hospitality industry, for example, used to operate in the past will most probably not operate like that in the future. And this requires innovation. This requires entrepreneurs to step up and think about new solutions, new ways of operating. And that's true, I would say, almost across industries. So it's a very, let's say, exciting time in terms of innovation.
And I think it was at the beginning when all this happened, it was probably a bit scary and overwhelming. And, I was working with a number of people that have had investments pulled. And now we're kind of entering this new, it's opportunity, isn't it? And I mean, even today's an example, we wouldn't have done this before this would happen. I think there's a lot of positive change that has actually come from this. So like kind of looking forward, what do you think that the pandemic impacts? What do you think it's going to be in terms of different trends that we're going to see emerging? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the innovation, game-changing tech, they're kind of the sort of the buzzwords that we're hearing at the moment. But really, it's going to be about identifying the challenges that exist and finding really good solutions for them. There's a multitude of challenges, new societal challenges that we find ourselves facing, and those that can come up with the right ideas to solve those problems, I think will be absolute winners in this period.
Maybe a few thoughts here. We've obviously looked at the future of a lot of sectors and what are the key trends right now, and I think that increased digitization of the world economy is particularly important in the healthcare space with health tech. We've seen a rapidly accelerating trend around that, and what we observe is that the healthcare infrastructure needs to be made more efficient. The way hospitals work, the way doctors, nurses work, can be drastically improved. And there's an interesting stats, which is kind of before March 2020, 5% of UK consultations with a GP, with a doctor, were made online, and 95% were in person. And after March 2020, it was the other way around. 95% of GP consultations were online, and only 5% were in person. And that means a lot more efficiency, a lot more an improved almost patient journey. People don't need necessarily to go to the hospital, go to the GP practice, wait there for hours to see a doctor. So I think that emphasis also on a better patient journey is really important. That's on health tech. We've seen similar trends maybe on e-commerce. I think the B2B segment of e-commerce, the entire supply chain, has proven how important it is in these COVID days, and it kind of kept up. It's still working. But what we also realize is a lot of improvements, a lot of digitization can happen in that sector. So that's also a massive source of opportunities.
It really excites me how many opportunities are going to become available, and quite amazing that this has all happened in such a short space of time, a really, really short space of time where environment has just completely changed. So we've got just over 10 minutes before we end this session. There's a couple of questions that haven't been answered here, but I would just encourage everybody, this is an opportunity we've got with two people that have got a lot of knowledge and experience. If you can think of any questions at all, please just put them in the comments. We've got one from Mariana here. How important is the company name when you start a business? She started with an education platform called Crack That English, and then she's going to change it to something else if that's not going to work out. So basically, how important is a business name? How important is it that you get it correct in that beginning stage? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the identity is reasonably important, but I think it very much depends on the business sector that you're going for. I mean, if you're talking about an educational platform, you will need to carve out some trust in your identity. I think that you need to carefully research the meanings of words and making sure that they're appropriate for the marketplace and the breadth of audience that you're trying to attract. I would say that you need to choose the name carefully and research it and make sure that it's going to work. Make sure that you're not going to have competitor issues, that you're not going to cross over sectors, and that it's going to have the right resonance with the target audience.
Yeah, I agree. I think in most of the startups that we invest in, they spend a bit of time thinking about their name. I would advise two things. First one is rebranding is a costly exercise, costly in terms of effort and time and sometimes money as well. So if a rebranding has to be done, better do it as early as possible when the business is still small and nimble. Now, that being said, early on in the founder journey, when you're still developing your idea and testing your market with a lean approach, I would not invest all my time in defining the name, but have this in the back of my mind and make sure that I have a timeline of, let's say, maybe 3 months where things are really getting serious. And at that point, I need to have a name. And it's quite common when we invest in startups that within the first 3 months, they change the name. So yeah, it's an important one to get right. It's not the first thing you need to do, but it should happen in the first, let's say 6 months.
I think it's something that you can test and you can get opinion on as well. Even through being able to mobilize some like covert online surveys to try and gauge word association and meaning and things is a good way to inform that brand exercise.
Yeah, it's all kind of exploring that problem in those beginning stages as well. Then you're speaking to people that are your target audience, so you can use them with surveys and getting that feedback and input. I would say is really very, very important to do. So we've got another question here from Eleni. What, in your opinion, are the main factors that help social enterprises to be sustainable and work successfully? The main factors that help social enterprises to be sustainable and work successfully.
Maybe I'll try my luck here. Because I built a social enterprise to some extent, and the way we thought about it is, I think first of all, the mission of the firm has to be very clear on what's the social aspect, what's the impact angle of it, and it has to be a mission that people kind of support. But then very early on, as you start launching the business, it comes down from my perspective to figuring out the unit economics and how this would work, because a social impact business, to be the most impactful has to be sustainable, which means it has to be profitable. And so your unit economics and the fact that every transaction generates marginal profit to the business, which means that that's cash that can then be reinvested and sustains the venture, is really important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of social entrepreneurs that are very passionate about the idea and the impact that they want to make, and will say it's going to be funded through government funding, it's going to be funded through the NHS, the hospitals, and they don't have any money. So that's why I always say from the very beginning, you need to identify how you can be long-term sustainable through actual having a very strong commercial element to your business is what I would recommend to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake, you had a comment to make.
Yeah, no, I think it's, just to kind of reinforce that. I mean, I think that having the purpose, a very clear purpose and intent for the social enterprise is hugely important. But like you say, being able to generate revenue and to sustain its own business model, I think is really important. You can't rely on external funding for an enterprise. It has to, in this day and age, everything has to be self-sufficient.
And when I developed my social enterprise, I did get grant funding from a few different sources. They all asked, how are you going to be long-term sustainable though? So I think that people will hear that there are pots of money available, but that's just for getting set up, and you need to have a very strong sense of how you're going to generate profit so you can invest that back. And also writing applications for funding is a full-time job in itself. That's a horrible thing to do.
Exactly.
Given the challenging circumstances we face across the globe, is it a good time to start a business as an entrepreneur? Or how do you know when the right time is? That's a really great question.
Okay. I think that's a really important one. I'm biased here because I think when entrepreneurs ask me when is the right time, I always answer now. Because if you're thinking about it, it means you have that inner drive, and it's the let's say success is something that compounds over time. Value is something that compounds over time. So the earlier you start, it will kind of compound faster. And it's always very easy to kind of find excuses or why you are not personally ready or why now is not the right time, etc. So I would say as soon as personally, from a financial perspective, you're comfortable enough, you have a few months of personal runway, then it's a good time to get started. And as long as the, let's say, broader macroeconomic context is also kind of supportive. And to be honest, the current environment, if difficult, remains a good environment to start a business. And if you look at economic cycles, a lot of the defining companies of today have been started at the beginning of the previous cycle in 2007, 8, 9. And nowadays, we think we're at the beginning of a new cycle, which will last maybe 7 years, maybe 10 years, maybe more. But the defining firms of tomorrow are being started now. So I think it's actually a great time to start a business.
Yeah, I think if the idea is right, obviously there's certain businesses that maybe shouldn't be started at this time. But I think if the idea is right and you have belief in it, the personal energy, like you say, the kind of personal runway to be able to put the hours in and not take an income, I think absolutely, if you don't do it now, you could regret it.
That was very encouraging. I felt from both of you there. I feel like I want to start something. So just looking back, and I wouldn't say like on your career, I suppose just in life, is there anything you would do differently looking back on kind of having the knowledge that you have now and what you know now? Is there anything you would do differently? I'll give you a second to think on that.
I maybe would have done it sooner. I don't know. Yeah, I think
exactly. I was about to answer that. I think I started having the drive to start a business maybe 4 years before I actually did. And I always found reasons why it was not the right time. I couldn't find the right co-founders, or I didn't have the right idea, or I struggled to validate it. And I think the earlier you start, the earlier you'll start learning, the earlier you'll start sharing your ideas.
Yeah.
The earlier people will start kind of encouraging you, supporting you, and that's the faster you'll get to finding co-founders, for example.
I think being really open to collaboration is really important to that.
Exactly.
And I probably, you know, if looking at my younger self, I probably would have said be more open to collaboration.
Great. So if you've got any last questions, you can put it in the comments section. I don't think we've got any other ones here right now. So I just want to ask both of you, is there a particular message you want to leave with these young aspiring entrepreneurs? Anything you would say to them? What's kind of the parting comments you would leave?
Yeah, I would say believe in yourself.
Exactly. Believe in yourself, believe in your ability to solve a problem. Believe also in your ability to attract people to come support you, whether they are advisors, whether they are investors, whether they are peers, other entrepreneurs. These, by the way, are great supporters because they go through exactly the same thing that what you're going through. Or whether there are employees. People will help you on your vision.
Absolutely.
So just share it.
And what about, sorry, Jake, on you go.
I was just going to say one more thing, and we touched on it earlier, is really know the space and the problem that you're trying to solve.
And I wanted to ask, did either of you have mentors as you went through your journey? Have you had mentors in life?
I personally had two cases. I had a case where I built a business in isolation. We had limited kind of other entrepreneurs we could rely on, and we had a few advisors. And I always try to find a few people, more or less formally, where I can just tune in with them once a month or even once a quarter and just offload, share what's happening. And it's always usually great reflections. I think something that's really important is a support network. So fellow entrepreneurs, that's of key importance, particularly in the early days.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been much more around the latter, the kind of the networks, support networks, peer sharing, knowledge sharing, I think is really, really important. People that you can have common experiences with, you can chat through the same challenges, you can see how other people have solved them. And just kind of get, benefit from other people's learnings as well, rather than a kind of mentor, because I think that can be quite, some one other person's experience can be quite siloed. So having that kind of community that you can tap into and share knowledge with is so valuable.
Well, thank you so much both for sharing this morning. We really appreciate you being with us and sharing your experience, your journey, your expertise. And I've also found it quite inspiring. And I think what you've just said about believing in yourself, I think when you kind of have that inner confidence and you don't think about any of the externals when you go for it, you can't believe what you can achieve. And that's what I think, looking back on what I've done. And I ended up somewhere I would have never thought I would have. And I would say everybody in the audience, if you can take that message away and everything else that you've learned today, that would be amazing. Yeah. Any last questions at all? I don't think so. No. Thank you so much both. And I would say to the audience, we've got the awards ceremony for Big Idea Creative Spark tomorrow morning. So that'll be streamed live in each of the individual 7 countries. And you can get the link. There should be an email gone round. There'll be a link on Facebook as well on the British Council pages. But that will be very exciting to see who has been announced winner for Big Idea Pitching Competition. Well, thank you so much to both of you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thanks a lot. This was fun.
Well, thank you.
At home for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hope it's been useful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been great. It's been really, really excellent. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.